In this episode, we chat with Stephen Bartel, the co-founder and CEO of Gem, a leading recruiting platform that combines ATS, CRM, AI sourcing, scheduling, and talent marketing. With nearly 100 integrations, Gem works alongside LinkedIn and other well-known job sources. Co-founder Stephen Bartel and Nick Bushak were previously engineering managers at Dropbox and Facebook, both companies that at the time were looking to rapidly hire and expand. Stephen and Nick knew that managing and nurturing relationships with top talent was going to require a new kind of software, built specifically for recruiters, that could automate tasks, track touchpoints, show pipeline views, and offer analytics for forecasting hires. Over 1,200 industry leaders, including Wayfair, Dropbox, Cintas, Robinhood, and UnitedHealth, trust Gem to fuel their growth. The company is backed by ICONIQ, Greylock, Accel, and other notable investors. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to subscribe. Steve, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
First question, what is the best insight you would provide to another entrepreneur?
I think the thing that I've learned from starting Gem is just the importance of talking to customers. And that entrepreneurs who are starting companies, my advice would be to go talk to 5 times as many customers as you think you need to. Because in my experience, that's the best way to get to product market fit. In fact, we'll probably get into this a little bit as we talk about the founding story of Gem and how we started our company. But we went and talked to 50 potential customers before we wrote a single line of code. And that was some of the most valuable learning that we had for Gem, which really set us in the right direction, both in terms of knowing what to go build, but also validating that the problem we were going to go solve was big enough to begin with.
And how far off the original thesis were you, or was it just kind of a variation of what you originally intended to build?
Because we went and talked to 50 customers, we were able to develop the original thesis to such precision that it's actually panned out in almost exactly the way we thought it would over the following 7 years now. And going into that, though, I will say, before we landed on Gem, we went and tried to validate 5-6 other ideas. So in terms of the original thesis for what we were going to go start, I mean, we couldn't have been further off. But we did that hard work of going and talking to customers before we started building so that we could course correct and actually go down radically different paths.
Was the original thesis in the recruiting realm, or was it in something entirely different?
No, it was entirely different. So we actually probably worked through 5 or 6 pretty meaty ideas before we landed on Gem. We looked at things ranging from the data analytics space to automating customer support tickets, because those are some of the teams that I had run at Dropbox when I ran all of our analytics tooling and platform, when I ran our data science team, when I ran our internal tools team for Dropbox. So, we had some familiarity with some of those problems. So those were some of the areas that we looked first. But actually, it wasn't until we were looking at an idea in the sales tech space, we were looking at whether we could apply some of the advancements in AI and speech to text to sales calls. Actually, what became Gong. And at the time, there were these companies, Gong and Chorus, that had just started. I think they'd been around for 2 or 3 years. Ultimately, we decided that we weren't the right founders to go start those businesses because we just didn't have very much experience in sales. And back then, we were hearing this objection a lot around, would companies be comfortable recording their sales calls? That felt invasive. And we just didn't know enough about the problem because we weren't domain experts. So we decided, all right, this doesn't feel quite right for us. But in looking at the broader sales and marketing tech landscape and talking to, I think for that idea, we probably went and talked to 70 different potential customers about how they manage their inside sales teams, ranging from actually AEs to sales managers to VPs of sales. We got this really great purview of all of the amazing technology that sales and marketing teams had at their disposal that had come online over the last 5-10 years. And we connected the dots with our really deep experience from recruiting and thought, oh my gosh, like all of this amazing tech that companies use to sell and market to customers would be incredibly valuable to sell and market to candidates. The insight being that recruiting was starting to look a lot more like sales and marketing in the sense that you wouldn't wait for candidates to come to your doorstep. You wouldn't just wait for them to apply. You would go out there and you would sell and you would market to the candidates that you wanted to pull in. And this was the approach that Dropbox very much took while I was there for 5 years as it scaled from 25 people to 1,500. It was the approach that Facebook was taking, where my co-founder was from. And most modern tech companies were starting to adopt this more proactive approach to hiring. But if it weren't for going really deep down this rabbit hole of exploring this other idea in the sales tech space, we never would have had that insight to take a lot of the best practices and technology that had been built out for sales and marketing teams and then bring those to recruiters.
Got it. So was it that you and your co-founder got together and said, we're going to start a business, and then together you did the research to figure out the first kind of MVP that you would build?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So me and Nick, my co-founder, we knew we wanted to go start something together, and we weren't sure exactly what we wanted to work on. But this idea of like building something from scratch, bringing something to life as builders, that was really, really exciting to us. And we actually committed back then that we would spend 18 months together, just trying to figure out what to go work on, validating different ideas, talking to hundreds and hundreds of customers, 18 full months of that before we gave up. Because one of our insights was that a lot of startups fail because either they give up after the first idea doesn't work out, or maybe they don't take the time to really validate whether that problem's worth going and solving in the first place. And I mean, credit goes to our good friends, Spencer and Curtis over at Amplitude, because this was the same approach that they took when they started Amplitude. And me and Nick, my co-founder, we spent a lot of time talking to Spencer in the early days and just picking his brain and getting his advice. And in fact, that's where he really drilled in on me the importance of talking to customers.
So it sounds like you did quite a bit of validating before you actually took your first step to building the product. How much time was devoted to just that research phase?
Yeah, good question. The bar that we held ourselves to before writing a single line of code was that we would go talk to 50 potential customers at least. We didn't want to just talk to 10 or 20 or even 30. We didn't feel like that would be enough signal to really know whether it was worth going and building something. And so for Gem, I think we were able to talk to 50 customers in 5 or 6 weeks. We had so much experience with recruiting, and Dropbox and Facebook had built up these massive recruiting teams to get to the scale they needed to. And so we were able to go directly into our network and just line up dozens and dozens of conversations in those first 2 weeks, in fact. And now that I've been working on Gem for a while, one of the most rewarding things about it is the customer. I mean, recruiters and talent leaders, they're some of the most amazing, phenomenal people in the world. I mean, they're people. It's their job, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're also really underserved. The idea that, me and Nick would be taking the time to sit down with them, learn about their world, learn about their problems, and that, finally somebody might come along and build technology for them that works was, I think, really exciting and made it easy to line up those customer conversations.
Well, you've done a really nice job, it seems, scaling and attracting some of the top investors. So tell us a little bit about what makes Gem different than the other recruiting solutions out there.
Yeah. So at this point, Gem is the leading all-in-one recruiting platform. But where we got our start was with this much more modern, proactive way of hiring. I think the insight was that recruiting was starting to look a lot more like sales and marketing, like we were talking about earlier. But most recruiting software was designed for this old way of recruiting. The canonical piece of software that everybody has is the applicant tracking system. And it's even in the name, applicant tracking system. It applies this old way of recruiting where you wait for people to apply. But what it doesn't help you do is manage and track all of the work that goes into recruiting before people apply. When you think about it, that's the real long pull for a lot of companies. When you think about the hundreds of recruiting outreaches that go into making an offer, when you think about all of the recruiting events, the campus recruiting efforts, referrals, talent marketing, advertising, there's so much work that happens in recruiting at the top of the funnel. And none of that is tracked in the applicant tracking system. There just isn't a good system of record for that. So, naturally, that's where we started with Gem, was this really great greenfield opportunity at the top of the funnel. And so that today is where Gem is most differentiated. At this point, we've got a recruiting CRM, which is the source of truth for passive talent, helps companies nurture those passive talent relationships so they can convert them into process. We've got sourcing automation, which helps automate a lot of the manual, tedious work that goes into reaching out to new talent and getting them into the CRM, getting them into the funnel. We've built out talent marketing and events products to help you run your talent marketing and branding initiatives, to help you manage and track events. We've even built out a recruiting analytics module called Talent Compass, where we take all of the top of funnel data and then we tie it to the data in your applicant tracking system so that you can understand the return on investment across all these different areas. Actually, very similar to this idea of like attribution from the world of marketing or advertising, where you would take those top of funnel touch points and then tie them to whether a deal was closed. So you can understand how much revenue is being influenced by your event strategy, for example. And recruiting teams are trying to do the exact same things. Like, how many hires am I influencing by my event strategy? How many folks are converting into process from my talent marketing and branding initiatives, the ads that we're running, all that good stuff. So I guess if I were to sum up how Gem is different, at this point, we're even building out our own applicant tracking system. And I think the thing that makes Gem really differentiated is all the things that are designed for this more modern, more proactive way of hiring, where you actually go out there and engage with the talent you want rather than waiting for the talent that applies.
And are there certain markets where Gem is most useful?
Yeah, absolutely. In my mind, Gem has pretty broad application. You could use it for pretty much any role that's a knowledge worker. So where we see that in terms of markets, though, is there's really relevant for tech companies everywhere, right? Because we're hiring for so many knowledge workers in tech companies, technical talent, data scientists, but also a lot of like the product design, a lot of the G&A roles, sales, finance roles, right? So tech naturally ends up being a pretty big sweet spot. About 2/3 of our business is SMB and mid-market tech companies. But we're also partnering with some of the largest tech companies in the world, companies like Google, Tesla, Salesforce, Cisco, Stripe, and also some of the largest enterprises in the world. Folks like UnitedHealth Group, so healthcare ends up being a pretty interesting vertical for us. Even leveraging Gem for skilled laborers like nurses and things like that is a really great use case. We partner with companies like American Accel, Cintas, some of these companies that you might not necessarily think of, but I think just speaks to the broad application of Gem and the ability to use it for pretty much any role that's either highly skilled or more of a knowledge worker.
What's currently the biggest challenge you're facing at this stage of the company's life cycle, as you begin to, continue along your growth path?
If you'd asked me a year ago, and for the first 6 years of Gem's history, it would have been hiring. And I think for any company that's raised money, that's growing, like hiring is usually the number one priority, right? And that's why we started Gem, of course. These days, a lot of our customers are seeing impact because of the market. In this tech downturn, it means many of our customers have slowed down hiring. And so Gem itself as a business, we're being a little bit more conservative with our growth and our investments until we see hiring pick back up. So I think the biggest challenge for us right now is probably a challenge that many tech companies are facing is just how do you weather this tech downturn and emerge stronger on the other side? The thing that we're doing about it is we're realizing, and we're hearing this loud and clear from the market, that our customers want more of an all-in-one consolidated platform where, both, I think customers have always been attracted to this idea that they can have their sourcing, their recruiting CRM, their applicant tracking system, their analytics, their talent marketing and events, their scheduling, that they can have this all in one platform under one roof. Because these things, if they're under one roof, they can naturally just work better together. Fewer things to integrate, more seamless, transition between these different systems. You don't have to jump between, one product and another. But the other reason why this is really exciting to customers in this environment is budgets are tighter. And they're realizing that if they go with a consolidated vendor, that they can usually save money versus stitching together different point solutions. So our number one priority as a business, our number one challenge, but also a huge opportunity, both for now and in the future, is we're building out our own applicant tracking system at this point to round out the full bundle for GEM. And it's going really well. We've been at it for just 3 or 4 months, but we've already got dozens of customers on it. And in just, I think, 2 or 3 months, it's going to be ready for most mid-market companies out there.
Got it. Back onto the kind of entrepreneurship topic. Did you show signs of being an entrepreneur when you were growing up or in high school or college? And then a second part to that is, do you think entrepreneurs are born or made?
Ooh, now that I think about it, yeah, I was always an entrepreneurial little kid. I think when I was 5 or 6, I got really excited about these quartz rocks in people's driveways. And so I'd find and pick out the best quartz rocks. I'd put them in my red wagon. I'd walk around and I'd sell them to the neighbors. So I had this little quartz rocks business. Eventually, my parents had to shut it down because I was taking all these rocks from our neighbors. And I didn't know any better. I was, 5 or 6. But yeah, when I was 7 or 8, I was baking chocolate chip cookies. And I had a little cookie stand every year at the Boston Marathon. In fact, that was one of my favorite times of year because I could get my cookie operation going. But even from that early day, I love that my parents kind of instilled this business mindset around it where they wouldn't go buy the ingredients for me. I had to go front the cost of the flour and the sugar and the, chocolate chips so that I could actually understand the business model of my little cookie stand. And I thought that was really cool in hindsight. But, I think that continued every step of the way. Pretty much every phase of my life, I was working one or multiple jobs, many of them these little side hustles that I had dreamed up as a kid. In terms of whether entrepreneurs are born or made, though, I think it's both. I think a lot of entrepreneurs definitely show probably this inclination for being entrepreneurial as a kid. But if that isn't your story, I wouldn't let that discourage you from going and starting something. It's never too late in my mind. And I think this world needs more entrepreneurs.
And what's your long-term big picture for your career? Do you think you're going to be a serial entrepreneur or one that builds kind of one company for a very long time?
I would love very much to build GEM for the rest of my life. I think we've got an amazing company. We've got an amazing opportunity ahead of us. And the journey has been just so rewarding so far. I really think that there's an opportunity to build the sales force for recruiting in this space. And when you think about it, recruiting is such an important problem. It's such a pervasive problem. It's a problem that every single company has. And it's usually a top 3 priority of the C-suite, all the way up to the CEO's desk, right? So I think over time, what we're going to see, and we've already seen this happen, but recruiting is just going to become more and more strategic. And if you believe that technology, if you believe that the knowledge worker economy is the future, well, then people become a company's most important asset. And that's only going to increase over time, right? So, I think we have the opportunity to build the sales force for recruiting. And I think that over the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, recruiting only becomes more and more important.
Excellent. Last 2 questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Yes. I think the first person that comes to mind immediately is Spencer Skates over at Amplitude, who I mentioned earlier. I think both his advice and mentorship in the early days of starting GEM, but also over the years, he's somebody I call a few times a year for advice on company building, but also just seeing what him and Curtis were able to create from nothing with Amplitude. That was a lot of the inspiration that Nick and I needed to go make the leap into starting Gem, to see two of our friends go and do that and to trailblaze, 3-4 years ahead of us.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
Ooh, yeah. I'm really passionate about education. I think if I wasn't an entrepreneur, I sometimes fantasize about being a teacher because that impact on kids is phenomenal. And I think education is just so important to our future. The one organization that comes to mind is something that I got a lot of in high school. It actually turned me on to technology and really inspired me a lot. And that's First Robotics. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's this really great nonprofit that helps get STEM in front of so many high school students out there by essentially getting them really pumped up about building robots. How cool is that to get to build robots as a high school kid? So I think that program is phenomenal. And I think it's really, really cool what they're doing.
Excellent. Well, Steve, want to thank you again for taking the time. I know our audience will find this very insightful.
Real quick, before we wrap, I completely forgot. I mean, most folks that we're talking to, a lot of these folks are founders. I didn't even give a quick plug. We have a free for startups program with Gem.
Excellent.
In fact, Gem is the whole platform that thousands of companies use, including some of the largest companies in tech. Founders can harness that full platform for free for up to 2 years to hire their founding team. Check it out, gem.com/startups. And it was great to be here.
Excellent.